Hey guys, Bartel's Bookshelf here with my Halloween Hangover video. Like I say, I found out about that phrase recently from other booktubers and other videos, so I'm using it until the 2 weeks are up. I always think of sort of the first 2 weeks as, the post-Halloween blues anyway, is what I usually call it. With said Halloween hangover, and with me having a few books that I was already in the middle of by the time Halloween ended, I would just get through the Halloween leftovers. Sorry if I'm a little more rambly or unfocused than usual. It's been a busy day today. I was just at a friend's birthday party, so I'm a little all over the place. First Halloween leftover is Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone by Benjamin Stevenson. This is actually a borrowed book from Nakia, who read it previously and really enjoyed it. This isn't technically really a spooky book. It's a murder mystery by an Australian writer. But it's got enough sort of like spooky elements that I figured I could slot it in there. And since it was a borrowed book, I could kind of kill two birds with one stone, You know what it's like as a reader. You're always borrowing books and, and then taking forever to read them. But anyway. So yeah, this is a murder mystery about a struggling author named Ernest, or Ernie Cunningham. And he's a sort of struggling writer. He writes manuals on how to write books, but he's very into like mystery fiction and stuff. And he has a lot of sort of ideas and thoughts about crime fiction and murder mysteries and things. And he comes from a very fractured family, where his father was a robber. He was a criminal and he was killed in a police shootout. So his family are sort of very distrusting of police and authority figures and stuff. And a few years ago, he dobbed in his brother for killing someone. But then he's invited to this winter resort sort of family reunion thing as his brother's getting out of jail. And as he goes to this secluded, wintry spot, a murder happens, and he basically has to use sort of his knowledge of sort of crime fiction tropes and stuff to try and solve the mystery. And in so doing, learn some secrets about his family as well. And the first thing you'll notice about the book, based on the title, is that it's a very sort of blunt, sardonic sense of humor. Very, very, very blunt, very sardonic, incredibly dry. That's actually kind of the main sort of appeal of the book, is the sort of sardonic writing style. There's a lot of sort of he'll stop sort of in the middle of a chapter to like make an aside to the reader, or he'll have like entire chapters where he just sort of pontificates on the order of the mystery and his role in it and how it fits into all these tropes. At the beginning of the book, there's even a recreation of Ronald Knox's 10 mystery rules, and he frequently like references these throughout the book. It's not like Douglas Adams or like, Hitchhiker's Guide in the sense that it's like a full-on parody of like, detective fiction. It's not like, Murder by Death or anything like that. It's more in the vein of something like Knives Out, where it's more kind of gently poking fun at some of these well-known, sort of well-worn tropes, and also kind of like doing its own thing with them and trying to be like its own sort of interesting murder mystery in and of itself. But I was kind of expecting all of that going in. I expected it to be funny and very, very sort of clever and pointing out tropes and things. What surprised me about the book was that there's actually a really solid family drama here, where each the book is split into different parts, and each one is separated by a big title about said member of the family. So in this case, my stepsister, my wife, my mother, my father, And through sort of each part of the book, we learn how the title relates, how everyone in his family has killed someone, and how those actions have sort of rippled throughout the family. And of course, as you can expect, the way that killed is used is very twisty and broad and sort of wibbly, wordplay, that type of thing, So it's really interesting to kind of see how everything, comes together, and the way that it depicts sort of the rift that's come through this family, and sort of the way that they're kind of reconciling with each other through this reunion is actually pretty well done. It was believable, and there were some really powerful moments. And there's also some decent atmosphere with the snowy setting. There's these like chalets, that they have to walk to from the main hall to like get to their beds and stuff. And I love a wintry setting for a murder mystery. It's classic, obviously. So yeah, this was fun, and I really enjoyed it. It actually is a series. So I probably will continue with it at some point. I've actually kind of redeveloped sort of a taste for murder mysteries after reading this. I haven't read one in a while. I'm really glad that this really kind of sparked, reignited that interest. So it was good. It was good. I wouldn't say it blew me away, but it was just solid. It was really solid, and I liked that. Very 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 cozy in a strange sort of way. That was enjoyable. Not, like I say, not exactly spooky, but it fit the bill enough. So there you go. As I mentioned before, reading Grady Hendrix's Paperbacks from Hell got me wanting to read more of the books that are mentioned in there. But of course, because of said Paperbacks from Hell boom, a lot of these old, horror things are very difficult to find for a decent price. But I was able to find two that were not horrible, under $25 at least, which for these types of things is very rare. And they sounded crazy and interesting. So, first off, I have Soulmate by Charles W. Runyon. I really like that cover, actually. I looked it up and I couldn't find the artist's name, but I just think it's really haunting and evocative, and I love the snake tail and the multicolors. It's really, really cool. But this is from the 70s, 1974, I believe, or 75. 74, yeah. So this is about an 11-year-old girl named Anne, who's, sort of just your typical, 11-year-old girl, kind of gangly and awkward, not much life experience yet, And while visiting a historical fort, her father has a sexual encounter with one of the female employees, and she ends up catching him, and through their meeting, this alien creature enters her and starts to take over her body. And her father dies a few days later from a mysterious illness, so the family's thrown into disarray. So she gets sent to her grandparents while her mother deals with, sort of her grief. And she basically starts to go through rapidly onset puberty, growing into essentially a fully grown woman. And she's compelled to go out and sate this burning desire, this burning hunger inside of her, that commands her to have sex with men. And every man who has sex with her comes to an unfortunate death. So based on that premise, that sounds wild. I wasn't sure what to think about it going in, but what surprised me upon reading this is that it's actually a lot more sort of sedate and almost classy in a weird sort of way than you would think based on that premise. She's essentially turned into a succubus. And so she's this adult woman, but she's still kind of got the mind of a child, and it sounds kind of weird and salacious, but it actually is kind of a sort of haunting exploration of this girl sort of out of humanity, a step outside, changed, in this strange way by this thing, going through something that she doesn't understand, and while there is, sexual activity in the book, it's not salacious. It's not salaciously written, I don't think. There's actually a lot of stuff where they don't even show anything. It just fades to black. So it's weirdly very tasteful. And the book turns more into this weird sort of meditation on her attempt to find a soulmate to sort of calm this burning fire within her, and further sort of understand this creature that's inhabited her and changed her into this beautifully seductive deadly woman. And it was actually a lot more interesting than I thought it would be, and a lot less sort of trashy, which was in some ways was a little bit disappointing, because part of the reason you pick up these kind of Paperbacks from Hell books is that you're expecting something just off the wall and just bizarre, and it sort of becomes this kind of a picaresque type thing as this girl sort of encounters all these different men. It's almost like a 70s riff on Michel Faber's Under the Skin or something like that. This strange alien creature masquerading as a woman, trying to find meaning or something. It was surprisingly decent and pretty well written. The characters were okay. By the nature of it being episodic, you don't really get to develop a lot of them, but they're decent enough. It feels pretty well lived in. There's also something that really surprised me. A major character in this is actually a disabled war veteran, and it actually goes into a lot of detail surrounding his life as a disabled man. Sort of the injuries that he sustained, how he deals with them, how they make him feel sort of psychologically, the way people treat him. It's not anything in depth or anything, but he's a major character in this book. He actually is sort of the secondary protagonist in a way, because he ends up finding out about Anne and sort of going on this quest to try and like find her to see if he can like use her sort of alien succubus powers to live forever, essentially, and heal his wounds and stuff. So it was really cool to see a book from this era where this, not only a disabled character, but a war veteran, a traumatized war veteran, is dealt with, very sort of matter-of-factly, I really liked that. It's not incredible, as I say, like it's a bit episodic. The characters are, can sometimes be interesting, but oftentimes like feel a lot sort of like 70s stereotypes. Like there's sort of like a 70s like drug lord pimp guy and stuff like that. And there's this whole episode set on a boat where it gets like a little sort of metaphysical and a bit sort of like 70s like woo woo kind of stuff, But it ends like in a surprisingly like chilling way, sort of like. Not the way that I expected it to go. It has this undercurrent of sort of like tragedy to it, which is like really surprising. And the horror stuff, because of the nature of like what she does to people through her, powers, there's some surprisingly shocking moments. So yeah, it was interesting. I actually looked up the author afterward, and I found that this was originally expanded from a short story that was published in the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction in 1970. So it's a little bit of like a classier joint than you might expect from like a Paperbacks from Hell read. So I don't know if it's essential. I paid $25 for this, and I don't know if it's worth it for that. But if that sounds interesting to you and you can find it for a good price, check it out. It's surprising to see people take sort of these kind of salacious ideas, and kind of treat them with like sort of a measure of sort of taste and dignity, I don't know. It's interesting. And now we have Jaron Summers' Below the Line. This is an old, beat-up leisure paperback from 1987. Again, this is mentioned in Paperbacks from Hell, and literally the sort of log line that Grady Hendrix introduced it as was that a man trying to get investors for his film attracts a guy who turns out to be a serial killer who wants him to make a movie, essentially a snuff film, where he wants him to sort of kill and rape his own son. So I went into, obviously, like, I heard that and I was like, again, like, that sounds fucking wild. And, like, that cover art is, like, lurid and, like, crazy, like, very, very 80s horror paperback, And again, it was one of the few books I could find for under $25. This was about $16. I know. This for $16. But I was like, okay, I'm looking forward to it. Like, let's try it. So this book is not really about that. So it is about an investor who's trying to make a movie. What's his name? Michael Darwin. He's written a spec script called Hollywood is Murder about a serial killer. And he meets this investor named Charles Burns, who has all this mysterious money and strange connections, and he's really interested in murder. And he basically says, okay, like I'll make, I can make your movie independently for $5 million, as long as you sign this life insurance policy. He basically starts trying to turn the movie into sort of his own autobiography, where he's kind of trying to explain his actions and stuff like that, and kind of wheedling his way into the family, and there's like a lot of stuff about like, what would you do? Would you sell your soul to make your dream project and that type of thing? Guys, this sucked. I'm sorry. So you would think on the salaciousness of that concept, you would think like, wow, this must be like crazy, and no. Most of this book is about, trying to get funding for a movie and the rigmarole of setting up offices and pre-production and that kind of thing. I think it's meant to be more so of a Hollywood sort of satire, rather than a sort of a full-fledged horror novel, although it tries to be, shocking and graphic, presenting this, extreme, case of, this horrible person trying to make this, like, horrible movie. Typical shit about, Hollywood suits, like, taking over your passion project and stuff. And it also wants to be, a thriller about this, like, super smart serial killer who can outwit everyone. But it's so boring, you guys, and the satire is so limp, like, stop me if you've heard, these these shocking archetypes before that no one's ever made fun of. Hey, did you know that sometimes Hollywood actors can be prima donnas? Yeah, I know, it's crazy. Did you know that sometimes they spend a lot of money on frivolous things like, nameplates for office doors and things like that? I know, you've never heard that before, but you will from this book. This is a very ripped from the headlines expose. And then the serial killer stuff is just so, like, generic, like, 80s thriller, like, trying to convince us, of what a genius Charles Burns is, how he, like, insidiously worms his way into their lives. He's, like, really obviously a murderer. Like, everyone in the book, like, every single character that like, sort of gets to know him tells Michael, hey, like, that guy's weird. Like, that guy's probably evil. Like, you shouldn't, like, be friends, like, you should keep an eye on him. That's weird, Michael's trying to sort of, like, play it off, and, like, tell himself otherwise and convince himself that, like, they're just, like, being paranoid or whatever, And then all of a sudden, like, 2/3 through the book, like, finally he's just like, all right, I can't, I can't deny all of the, like, weird shit that he does. Like, he's crazy and I'm gonna take him down. But he's also trying to make his movie at the same time. And Charles is supposed to be like this, super genius, Hannibal Lecter type guy, but he even just, like, straight up tells people, or he, like, reveals things about, like, the crimes, that he's done, or, like, sort of his interest in them. And again, they try to make it into sort of a Hannibal Lecter thing, or it's like he's doing it on purpose to sort of, like, bait Michael and see if he can, like, challenge him or whatever, but it's really pallid, and it's not, like, really fleshed out in any interesting or unique way. And there's just a lot of stuff where it's like the author wants us to believe that believe all of these things, like this world that he's set up, and it's just so ridiculous. Like, another example was like, so the reason Charles gets interested in his screenplay, in Michael's screenplay in the first place, is because he says, like, you've developed this crazy new theory, that you're gonna change the field of psychoanalysts. All the psychoanalysts are gonna hate you. And Michael talks about, like, oh, like, everyone I've, like, shopped the script to says, like, I'm a crackpot, and he's like, no, it's genius. Like, no one's ever seen it before. You want to know what this, like, crazy idea is about serial killers? That a lot of them were sexually maladjusted. I know. Again, like, isn't this crazy and shocking? Aren't you surprised by this development? But they're presenting this like it's this, like, insane, crazy thing that no one's ever thought of before, and just stuff like that, where it's just, like, ridiculous and stupid, and not in a fun way, because the rest of it isn't even crazy or lurid enough to be worth, to keep going, Like, again, like, you read that, like, based on that, like, lurid concept, that crazy, like, exploitation thing, and you would think, like, oh, like, this is gonna be crazy, and no, it's just boring, it's just limp, and just bleh. And it doesn't even have the courage of its convictions, because there's all of these, like, really dark, like, things set up, like that they could expand on, like, you think, making you think that it's going to go in a certain direction, and then they don't. They back out last minute, and it just feels so cowardly. You're trying to say all this stuff about, sort of the transgression of Hollywood, and and how, like, maybe it is better to be, like, to have a little bit of, like, morality and stuff. And then you're purposefully throwing all of these, like, lurid things into your book because, you think it'll make it sell, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It just feels so, like, soulless and just, like, pre-made bestseller, type deal, like, I don't know, it was just so bad and so boring. I really hated it. Honestly, the only reason I finished it was because I spent $16 on it, and I was like, I am not gonna have sunk $16 into this book and not finish it. So, that's really unfortunate. Unfortunate to end this, Halloween hangover on a bit of a down note. But I'll keep reading, and hopefully I'll find something new, and if I'm able to find any more sort of old horror paperbacks that aren't too expensive, maybe they'll be the ones that finally, hold up the promise of Paperbacks from Hell, I've also got some of those Valancourt reprints I should read, so we'll see. Like I say, I'm definitely going to keep reading horror. I'm actually reading a few other horror books right now, so hopefully I'll have better things to talk about next time, but until then, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.